With the release of a new report on Iran's alleged nuclear weapons program, the talk of war on Iran is ramping up once again. But given the long and documented history of Western intervention in the region, what is this call for war really about, and what is it likely to achieve? This is your GRTV Backgrounder for globalresearch.ca. Welcome. This is James Corbett of the Corbett Report with your GRTV Backgrounder for globalresearch.ca. This month's release of a new International Atomic Energy Agency report into Iran's nuclear energy program has caused a flurry of diplomatic activity, political posturing, and breathless news headlines about the supposed imminent threat of an alleged Iranian nuclear weapons program. Given the nature and tenor of the coverage of the report in the mainstream press, one might be forgiven for believing that the agency has in fact uncovered new signs that Iran has made any concrete steps towards creating a nuclear weapon since it suspended that program in 2003, or that there is any evidence whatsoever that Iran has made any progress in the development of nuclear weapons technology. In reality, however, the report contains no new information about Iran's alleged attempts to create nuclear weapons, a fact quietly conceded by even the most hawkish opponents of Iran's nuclear program, including former weapons inspector David Albright.
This is really very, very important. David, what actually did the report say? Did it say that Iran has the technology for a device right now?
Well, it knows how to build a crude nuclear device. It's learned enough. It doesn't have the key nuclear material to do it, but it learned a lot. And prior to 2004, it had a well-structured nuclear weapons program that if it hadn't stopped under tremendous international pressure in 2003, it probably would have succeeded today.
And is the report saying or predicting when a nuclear weapon can be built?
No, it's not, because the report clearly says that some things have continued after this abrupt halt in 2003. But it's been unfocused, and it doesn't appear that they, for example, know how to build a warhead that could be put on a ballistic missile.
Nonetheless, this is going to be the foreign policy issue for this president and the next president. So, Karim.
However, because the report fails to state whether Iran's efforts have resumed or tapered off since 2003, there's still no concrete reason to think it poses a genuine threat. Likewise, the report does not indicate whether Iran possesses weapons-grade enriched uranium or the capacity to produce it. To that end, talk of military strikes could be premature unless justifying this type of action was the report's original purpose. And that is what everybody's talking about.
Well, the New York Times reported that the head of the IAEA actually went to the White House and presented his findings 12 days before it was released. I mean, why does the U.S. get to check it off first? I mean, it's the IAEA, it's the United Nations body. Why is only one party given access to it, or is it to check, make sure the outcome is right? I mean, it does look a bit suspicious here.
I don't see it as much suspicious at all. Look, if anyone's going to take military action, it will probably be the United States, and that's why the United States has the strongest encouragement to seek sanctions so that we don't have to rely on the last resort, which is military action.
Given the distinct lack of any new evidence whatsoever to support the contention that Iran is in fact developing nuclear weapons, the question may well be asked why this report is being trumpeted so loudly in the press, and why the public is being told there is the need for urgent action on this case. The seeming paradox of an urgent need for action on an issue that has in reality remained static for nearly a decade is resolved when one understands this recent round of fear-mongering as a small part of a much longer history of Western interference in Iranian politics, a history that stretches back for the better part of a century. In 1941, British and Soviet forces executed a joint surprise attack on Iran. The British were concerned about their Anglo-Iranian oil company interests. The Soviets ended up securing petroleum concessions before their withdrawal in 1946, and both were interested in securing the Trans-Iranian Railway for the Allied war effort. When Dr. Mohammad Mossadegh was elected Iranian Prime Minister in 1951, he nationalized the country's oil reserves, thus enraging Britain, whose Anglo-Iranian oil interests were once again threatened. The British began an Iranian oil embargo and secured U.S. help in fomenting a coup that succeeded in overthrowing Mossadegh via a CIA operation codenamed TP Ajax that was led by Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of the former U.S. President, Teddy Roosevelt. The coup ushered in a new era of brutal dictatorship in which the Shah ruled with an iron fist, protected by the bloody rule of his secret police, the much-dreaded Savak. In 1979, an Islamic revolution led by Ayatollah Khomeini deposed the Shah and installed a new Islamic republic, although reports persist to this day that Khomeini had been protected and promoted by the British, French, and Americans, who had become wary of the Shah's nationalist tendencies. In 1981, the American hostages who had been seized at the U.S. Embassy during the revolution were released in what is now widely acknowledged to have been a political deal cut with representatives of the Ronald Reagan campaign, a deal which supplied Iran with weapons and access to U.S. funds in return for delaying the release of the hostages until Reagan had been elected president. In 1988, American forces shot down an Iranian commercial airliner with 2 SM-2MR surface-to-air missiles over the Straits of Hormuz, killing all 290 passengers and crew, including 66 children. It had been shot down by an American cruiser which was in Iranian waters at the time of the incident, and the plane had been in Iranian airspace at the time it was destroyed. The U.S. never admitted wrongdoing for the incident, nor so much as apologized, although it did pay a $61.8 million compensation package as a result of International Court of Justice proceedings. In the light of this historical background, the current round of Iranian hysteria has to be seen as only the latest version of a very old story of imperial conquest in Persia, and part of a greater strategy to dominate one of the key countries in the Middle East. In its latest iteration, this story relies on the exclusion of a central hypocrisy: that the only nuclear power in the Middle East is in fact Israel, a country with the 6th largest nuclear stockpile in the world that is not a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, and whose weapons have never even been formally acknowledged, let alone inspected, by the IAEA. In this story, Israel, the only nuclear power in the region and the largest recipient of US military aid, supposedly faces an existential threat by the idea that one day the Iranian government might actually develop the capability of constructing a single nuclear warhead. Nevertheless, Israel has been at the heart of the latest round of warmongering over Iran, with Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu openly rallying his cabinet for a preemptive strike on Iran on the same day that reports emerged of a secret meeting between the Chief of General Staff of the Israeli Defense Force, Lieutenant General Benny Gantz, and the British military chief, Sir David Richards. Given the growing number of diplomats, intelligence chiefs, and heads of state who have lined up to caution Israel about such a strike, led perhaps most ominously by an increasingly aggressive China, and a Russia that still poses a formidable military threat, many are asking what Israel hopes to gain by starting a conflict that many analysts have noted would be the most dangerous step yet on the path to a full-scale World War III scenario. I had the chance to put that question to investigative journalist Wayne Madsen, who recently penned an article on the issue earlier this week.
Well, there have been a number of times, going back to when Bush was president, George W. Bush, where the intelligence chatter indicated that there was a possible attack on Iran in the works. Certainly before the 2004 presidential election, there was a flurry of this chatter. Obviously, the Bush team, Bush and Cheney, may have been wanting to send a signal to the Iranians and also to the American public that war with Iran was a likelihood, and give people the idea, well, why change presidents in midstream? Why vote for John Kerry when we may have another national security issue? So we've seen this happen time and time again, but I think what really is changing this dynamic now is the fact that Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, has actually publicly stated he's trying to get the Israeli cabinet to approve an Israeli strike on Iran. And we also know from the State Department cables that were released through WikiLeaks that Israel and Saudi Arabia are cooperating very closely, military and intelligence-wise, on a potential Israeli strike on Iran, which would, of course, have to overfly Saudi airspace to reach Iran. And then we have the U.S. military shifting 4,000 troops out of Iraq into Kuwait. So although Obama says we're leaving Iraq, just look at where these troops are being redeployed. They're being redeployed to the Gulf states of Kuwait and the Emirates and Qatar, and we have the CIA with its drone bases all through the area. And so you look at this and the fact that there's this leak of an International Atomic Energy Agency report saying that Iran has started up its nuclear weapons production, when we do know that the new Director General of IAEA, Yukiya Amano, is nothing like his predecessor, Mohammed Al-Baradei. Amano is basically a tool for the United States. So he'll say anything that the U.S. and Israel wants him to say. He's definitely not independent as an IAEA director. So all this said and done, I think we have to look at the real possibility that the war clouds are forming, and we had this explosion at an Iranian missile production facility outside of Tehran just the other day, and it's being suggested that that was a sabotage by a joint CIA-Mossad team. And we've seen this happen inside Iran before, using domestic terrorists, ethnic-based Baluchis and others. And I think this is just indicates that they're trying to soften up Iran for a potential military strike.
Now, the IAEA is preparing a resolution condemning Iran for its nuclear activities, leaving the door open for yet more punitive sanctions on the Iranian government. As the world braces for what looks increasingly like the early stages of yet another war in the volatile region, Iran continues to deny that it is seeking to develop atomic weapons. Israel continues to dodge the question of its own nuclear stockpile. And the United Nations Security Council looks set once again to be the vehicle for the justification of sanctions and potential war. For more on this story and other breaking news and current events, please go to globalresearch.ca. For more research and analysis by James Corbett, please go to corbettreport.com.